The 1990s gave us NASCAR cars that were fast, loud, and unforgettable. Today we count down 12 of the quickest machines that ruled the track. Number 12. Chevrolet Lumina, 1990. The 1990 Chevrolet Lumina did not just cruise down highways, it stamped its mark in NASCAR tracks with a speed that made jaws drop. Even though it looked like a family sedan you would see parked outside a grocery store, this machine had the heart to push past 110 miles per hour and keep climbing. Sounds ordinary at first, right? Well, not when you hear the full story. Moving along, what really makes this car stand out is the way it was born. Chevrolet built the Lumina as their very first front-wheel drive mid-size sedan, a bold shift for a brand that usually stuck to big, heavy machines. Instead of making it only a family car, they used the same name in NASCAR racing even before regular people could buy one. That clever trick made fans think, wait, what car is this? And then they saw it fly around the track, and suddenly, the Lumina became unforgettable. Now here comes the fun part. While the regular Lumina you could drive to school or work had a 4-cylinder engine, the upgraded V6 option gave it some real kick. That stronger version could jump from 0 to 60 miles per hour in just under 10 seconds, which back then was no small deal. On a quarter-mile run, it covered the distance in 17 to 18 seconds, keeping pace with some serious contenders. Think about it. This car looked calm, but it had the legs to run when it mattered. Switching gears, let's talk about the shape. The Lumina ditched the boxy look from the 80s and went with smooth, clean lines that cut through the air much better. The design helped not only on the road but also on NASCAR tracks, where every bit of wind resistance matters. With colors like dark sapphire blue and bright white, the car could look sharp without trying too hard. Inside, the space was wide and comfy. Perfect for families, but the dashboard focused on pure function. Because when you are going fast, you need things simple and clear. And here's something curious, you might laugh at this. The Lumina did not come with airbags at first. Instead, it had seat belts attached to the doors. So, when you opened the door, the belt moved with it like it was alive. It met safety rules, yes, but drivers often joked that the belts were the most talkative thing in the car. Still, it showed how car makers were trying new ideas in that time. Finally, think about the NASCAR version. In 1989, before people even saw a Lumina at the dealership, it was already tearing up the racetrack. Letters poured in from fans complaining about Chevrolet having an aluminum advantage. But rules allowed it, and the Lumina held its ground as a strong name in racing history. Number 11. Pontiac Grand Prix, 1993. After the Lumina made its noise on the track, the next car brings even more attitude with its mix of family comfort and racing edge. The 1993 Pontiac Grand Prix showed the world that a car could be both stylish for the streets and fierce enough to carry speed into NASCAR glory. It might have looked like something parked in a driveway, but when the engines kicked, this Pontiac had no interest in staying calm. Now, before we even talk numbers, let's take a moment to picture how bold this car looked. The front end stretched long with a sharp nose, while the rear was short and tight, giving it a stance that always seemed ready to pounce forward. Pop-up headlights added a futuristic touch, almost like the car winked at you before racing away. Around the back, wraparound taillights gave it a glowing signature that other drivers remembered mostly because they usually saw it from behind. And here comes a detail that made gearheads grin. The driver's seat felt like a cockpit made for speed. Controls were built close to the driver's hands, and with soft touch buttons, plus an optional heads-up display that projected speed onto the windshield. It was almost like sitting in a video game. That little trick gave drivers the edge of keeping their eyes locked on the track while still knowing exactly how fast they were flying. Sliding into performance, this is where the Grand Prix truly flexed its muscle. The most powerful option came with a 207 cubic inch V6 that made this machine sprint from 0 to 60 miles per hour in about 8 seconds flat. On the quarter-mile stretch, it crossed in roughly 16 to 17 seconds, and when fully opened up, it could reach a top speed climbing beyond 130 miles per hour. For a midsize car meant for daily driving, those numbers gave it bragging rights far beyond its family-friendly image. But let's not forget how it handled. With quick steering and suspension that balanced comfort with agility, the Grand Prix could weave through city streets or sweep across wide highways with confidence. It wasn't just about going straight fast. It also had the control to keep that speed feeling stable and safe. That blend made drivers trust the car whether they were heading to work or testing limits on open roads. What really makes this story fun is the timing. The 1993 model closed a chapter for the Grand Prix with its last run of certain body features like the old B4U body kit and even the final chance to order a manual transmission. Small quirks, like a glove box with a number lock instead of a key, gave the car personality that fans still talk about today. And to top it off, racing editions tied the Grand Prix name to NASCAR energy, pulling in fans who loved speed as much as style. That connection made sure the Grand Prix would not just be remembered as another mid-size car, but as a machine with the spirit to push faster and faster. Number 10, Oldsmobile Cutlass Supreme, 1991. Grand Prix gave us a taste of speed with style. Now, the story shifts toward a car that some folks might call a sleeper. The 1991 Oldsmobile Cutlass Supreme may look like a calm family ride, but when pushed, it could sprint and stretch its legs on a track in ways that left many drivers wide-eyed. To start with, the looks carried that early 90s American flavor, where designers were chasing a more modern shape while still holding on to square touches from the 80s. In bright red paint with clean gray trim, this car had a kind of boldness that said, "I am practical, but I know how to have fun." Even the basket weave wheels, only 15 inches wide, added a touch of sporty character, even if they sometimes looked small next to later upgrades. But the real story waits when you open the door and check the cabin. Analog gauges gave drivers the clear readouts they wanted, while some versions carried a futuristic digital display that looked like it came out of a computer lab. Drivers loved the 4 separate bucket seats, and the shifter in the middle made it feel less like a rental car and more like something special. Add in a power driver's chair, and suddenly comfort joined the mix with performance. Under the hood lived the heart of the Cutlass Supreme, a 189 cubic inch V6 engine making about 140 horsepower. That might not sound like a fire-breathing monster, but put it to work and you would find it strong enough for plenty of excitement. It could hit 60 miles per hour in about 10 seconds flat, and across the quarter mile, it crossed in a respectable 17.5 seconds. Those numbers were quick enough to remind drivers that even a so-called family car could have some bite. Shifting our attention to how it drove, the front-wheel drive setup gave it good grip in everyday roads, especially when weather turned tricky. The suspension aimed for balance, comfortable for long drives, yet sturdy enough to keep control when the pace picked up. On highways, it floated with ease, but on back roads, it had enough sharpness to keep the ride interesting. This made the Cutlass Supreme a car that drivers could trust, whether cruising to work or chasing the thrill of acceleration. One detail that often makes people smile is how clean many of these cars remained even decades later. Headliners stayed tight, cloth seats were better than expected, and dashboards avoided the peeling and cracking that haunted some rivals. Add to that the unmistakable sound of a GM V6 working hard, and owners carried memories of a unique growl that could be picked out even in a crowded parking lot. And here's the fun twist. The Cutlass Supreme was not just a driveway car. It carried its name into NASCAR competition, proving that even with its everyday image, this Oldsmobile had the right bones to handle speed on the big tracks. That blend of comfort, durability, and racing connection locked its place in the story of fast American cars. Number 9, Chevrolet Monte Carlo, 1995. You think the last car was fast? Wait until you hear about the one that showed up in 1995 wearing the Monte Carlo name like a champion belt. This car was not shy. It was loud in spirit, bold in look, and ready to remind everyone that Chevrolet knew how to make a race car. Here's the interesting part. The Monte Carlo was built off the same bones as the Lumina sedan, but it came with its own special twist. The body had a coupe shape, the face looked different, and the back had its own style. Even the dashboard carried a funny fake wood stripe that shouted, "Look at me, I am classy." But do not let that fancy trim fool you, because under the hood was a big surprise. The Z34 trim carried a 207 cubic inch V6 with twin cams, making 210 horsepower. That was 10 more than the year before, and enough to make you grin as the numbers rolled up on the speedometer. This engine could launch the car from 0 to 60 miles per hour in just 7.8 seconds, which was very quick for a front-wheel drive coupe in the 90s. Let me tell you something fun. This speed was not just for bragging rights at the diner. On the racetrack, the Monte Carlo Z34 could run side by side with a Ford Thunderbird and give it a hard time. The T-Bird had a V8, but the Monte Carlo's V6 had more horsepower. The Ford had more torque, yes, but the Chevy had the bragging rights in raw numbers. Now, if you think straight-line speed was all it had, think again. Around corners, the Monte Carlo held on strong, pulling 0.82 G of grip on the skid pad. It could also dance through a 600-foot slalom at 61.3 miles per hour, and that was not bad at all for a car tuned more for comfort than crazy driving. When it reached the limit, the car understeered a little, which basically means it preferred to play it safe rather than spin out. And speaking of comfort, the Z34 came with standard gear that made long drives easy. Air conditioning, cruise control, anti-lock brakes, power windows and locks, a split folding rear seat, and even a fancy anti-theft system were all included. The front seats were sporty buckets, and while some people thought they hugged too much, others found them just right. The large coupe doors made getting in a little tricky in tight parking spots. But once you were in, the cabin felt roomy and filled with storage spots for tapes, phones, and maps. But here's the truth. Despite being built for comfort, this car still knew how to hustle. The quarter mile came in 16 seconds flat at 88.7 miles per hour, which was quick enough to leave plenty of cars behind at the stoplight. Braking took a little longer than some rivals, needing 139 feet to stop from 60 miles per hour, but that only added drama to the ride. Number 8. Ford Taurus, 1998. And just when you think the story of fast racing cars could not twist any further, along comes a machine that dared to look different from every other sedan of its time. The year was 1996, and Ford rolled out the Taurus with shapes that looked like someone took the Ford logo and stretched it all over the car. Ovals were everywhere, on the back window, on the dash, and even on the side glass. People either laughed at it or loved it, but nobody ignored it. Moving from looks to speed, here is where the Taurus makes its mark. The numbers may not shock you at first, with 0 to 60 miles per hour taking 8.6 seconds and the quarter mile passing in 16.4 seconds. But do not walk away too fast, because the surprise came on the NASCAR track where this car became a true legend. Think about this. The Taurus became the very first four-door sedan to be approved for NASCAR competition. 4 doors on a racing car sounded crazy at the time, but when it hit the oval track, all doubts vanished. This sedan went from family car to race winner, and it gave drivers the tool they needed to win championships. Switching gears to the way it was built, the third-generation Taurus shared parts with the Mercury Sable, the Lincoln Continental, and even the Windstar van. That may sound like an odd group of cousins, but the Taurus stood apart with its bold body lines. Ford designers wanted to shock people, and shock they did, with curves everywhere, instead of the flat lines seen on the past models. Inside the cabin, the story only grew more wild. Ford decided that everyone would get bucket seats now. But if you still wanted 6 people to fit, a clever flip-fold seat popped up in the middle. Push it one way and you had a console with cup holders, flip it again and you had another seat. It was like car magic, and it made kids argue about who got the middle spot. Now, let us talk about how it felt behind the wheel. The dashboard wrapped slightly around the driver, almost hugging you with all the controls close enough to grab without taking your eyes off the road. The gauges sat in an oval pod. The radio and climate knobs were in one big oval block in the center, and everything seemed designed so you could reach and go without hunting around. Here's the part that connects back to NASCAR, because when you mix a car shaped like an oval with controls shaped like ovals, you get something that feels built for the oval track. And sure enough, by 1998, the Taurus stepped into racing and became the weapon of choice. From there, the wins started stacking, with the Taurus scoring multiple championships in both top-level cup racing and the Busch Series. Number 7. Chevrolet Camaro SS-1996. Sliding from the wild ovals of the Taurus into something sharper, we now meet a car that came ready to snap necks and burn rubber, the 1996 Chevrolet Camaro SS. This one carried the nickname Catfish Camaro, and while the name sounds funny, its bite was anything but soft. Rolling forward, the story begins under the hood, where the mighty 232 cubic inch Series 2 V6 sat waiting, pushing out 200 horsepower. That was the base setup, but the SS trim came armed with bigger wheels, stronger tires, and suspension tricks that made turning at high speed feel like second nature. This Camaro did not just move, it clawed the road with every spin. Now let's talk about the speed numbers, because they matter. The Camaro could leap from 0 to 60 miles per hour in only 5.8 seconds. Yes, that means by the time you blink twice, it is already flying down the straight. Carry that run longer, and the quarter mile disappeared in 14.2 seconds flat. These times made it faster than many rivals of its day. And that quickness is exactly what gave it its place in NASCAR talk. Moving past the stopwatch, the Camaro SS also handled stops and turns with authority. Thanks to four-wheel disc brakes, sharper steering, and grippy wheels, borrowed from the Corvette ZR1 playbook, it never felt shy about being pushed hard. Even the convertible version carried a special set of 16-inch wheels to hold traction when the top was down and the air was loud. With its long heritage dating back to the late 60s, the Camaro had always promised speed, but in 1996, it delivered numbers that still turn heads. And just wait, because the next machine in line proves that NASCAR speed was not slowing down at all. Number 6. Oldsmobile Achieva, 1994. The 1994 Oldsmobile Achieva Special Edition, at first glance, you might not expect this family sedan to have a ticket into the world of speed talk, but stay tuned, because it had more bite than its calm face suggested. Sliding straight into the numbers, the Achieva carried a 189 cubic inch V6 engine with 155 horsepower. That meant it had the muscle to push past traffic with confidence. And when it came to torque, 185 pound-feet made sure it pulled forward even when fully loaded with passengers. This was not just about cruising comfortably. It had enough punch to keep your heart a little lighter on the gas pedal. But here is where curiosity sparked. The stopwatch. From 0 to 60 miles per hour, the Achieva needed 9.5 seconds. Sure, that sounds longer than the Camaro we just saw, but think about it. This was a mid-size sedan aimed at comfort, yet it still carried speed numbers that kept it competitive in its class. And when stretched down the quarter mile, the run stopped at 17.1 seconds, crossing the line at 82.4 miles per hour. Not bad at all for a car often labeled as practical. Now, speed is only half the story. Stopping matters just as much. And this Oldsmobile handled that part with composure. From 60 miles per hour back to a standstill, it needed 141 feet of road. Anti-lock brakes were part of the deal, and that kept things steady even when drivers pushed harder than usual. It gave confidence that this car was not just about moving forward, but also about staying in control. The fun part came with the ride itself. Owners got cushioned seats, a roomy trunk, and even thoughtful touches like cruise control and power windows, but the sport suspension in the special edition added a sharper feel. It was not a track car by birth, but it played the role of a spirited daily driver surprisingly well. That balance, comfort mixed with a dash of speed, is what made the Achieva worth talking about in any conversation about fast sedans from the 90s. And just when you think the story ends with an Oldsmobile keeping pace, the next car steps forward with an entirely different kind of attitude, proving that every chapter in the NASCAR speedbook carries its own flavor. Number 5. Chevrolet Beretta, 1990. The 1990 Chevrolet Beretta Indy Coupe was not just a commuter. This was a pace car turned street car, and the look alone could make people snap their heads for a second glance. Sliding deeper into what made this Beretta special, the design carried bold stripes, hot pink graphics, and even Porsche-style mirrors that made it stand out from the regular crowd. The wheels were 16-inch aluminum with body-colored accents, and every part of the car screamed fun. This was Chevrolet making sure even a front-wheel drive coupe had the attitude to feel like part of the race. But the flash was not the only story. Powering this Indy coupe was a 189 cubic inch V6 with 135 horsepower, tied to a 5-speed manual transmission. That stick shift gave drivers a true connection with the car, making each gear feel like part of the show. Even though the numbers might sound calm compared to other race-bred cars, the lightweight build gave it surprising punch. Now let's talk about performance times, because this is where the fun ramps up. The Beretta could launch from 0 to 60 miles per hour in about 8.5 to 10 seconds. On the quarter-mile stretch, it finished in 16 to 18 seconds, crossing with speed near 120 miles per hour, top speed, somewhere between 120 and 130 miles per hour. And for a car born in the early 90s, that was a thrill ride waiting to happen. Braking was steady too, thanks to its Level 4 handling package with gas shocks, power rack and pinion steering, and front power disc brakes. It could cut speed cleanly, giving confidence on long runs. The handling gave a nimble feel that many drivers did not expect, and that's what kept it entertaining beyond just straight-line speed. Stepping inside, drivers were greeted with sporty bucket seats, yellow accents, and Indy logos stitched right into the headrests. A leather-wrapped steering wheel sat in front of a full set of gauges, and with the sunroof option, the car opened up to even more fun. It was a balance of style, comfort, and playfulness, all wrapped in one package. And as the Beretta rolled off the track and onto the streets, Another contender was already lining up, ready to show how fast the 90s could really feel when NASCAR speed kept pushing forward. Number 4. Pontiac Bonneville SSE, 1992. This is the 1992 Pontiac Bonneville SSE, and it came to prove that speed could be dressed up in full comfort. Right away, the Bonneville's looks made a statement. Finished in bright white paint with bold lower body panels and a wide rear spoiler. It did not try to be shy. The design carried smooth lines across the sides, tall glass all around for clear vision, and a stance that let people know it was more than a family cruiser. Even the body-colored 16-inch Aerolite wheels added flair, and the Kelly Edge touring tires were ready to grip the road. Moving from the surface to what held it steady, Pontiac gave this car brains, as well as brawn. It carried traction control, four-wheel independent suspension, and electric leveling to keep the ride balanced, even when loaded up. Those touches gave the Bonneville a reputation for handling far better than people expected from a big sedan. At high speeds, it stayed confident, and when braking, the anti-lock system worked hard to keep it calm. Sliding into the cabin, comfort was clearly part of the mission. Slate gray leather wrapped the seats, with the front buckets powered for adjustments, and a rear bench that gave riders space to stretch. Features included keyless entry, a head-up display that projected numbers right in front of the driver's eyes, and automatic climate control to keep things steady no matter the season. A Delco stereo with 8 speakers and even a cassette deck meant music stayed loud and proud on the highway. Now, what powered all of this comfort and technology? Under the hood sat the 232 cubic inch V6, using tuned port injection to deliver smooth strength. It worked with a 4-speed automatic transaxle, sending power to the front wheels. This was not just about moving gently. The Bonneville could reach 60 miles per hour in 10.1 seconds, and the quarter mile disappeared in 17.4 seconds. Those may not sound like race car numbers, but for a full-size sedan with loads of features, it was a surprising punch. As if that was not enough, Pontiac made sure the driver always felt in command. A leather-wrapped multifunction steering wheel carried controls within reach, while gauges kept watch on speed, oil pressure, fuel, and temperature. The low belt line and wide windows gave excellent visibility, making highway runs and city drives equally comfortable. Number 3. Ford Probe GT, 1993. The 1993 Ford Probe GT, a car that looked sharp and packed enough speed to turn heads at every green light. To start with what moves it, the Probe carried a 152 cubic inch V6 engine that spun smooth and strong all the way to 7,000 revolutions per minute. Instead of loud shakes or rough noise, it felt like the car was singing as it pulled forward. That motor pushed out 164 horses, which gave the GT the power it needed to run free without losing its balance. The numbers told the story as well. This Ford jumped from 0 to 60 miles per hour in only 7 seconds flat. Keep the pedal down a little longer, and the quarter mile passed by in 15.5 seconds at 89 miles per hour. If you kept stretching the run, the car topped out at 133 miles per hour, a figure that made rivals nervous and drivers smile. But it was not just about how quick it went straight ahead. Ford engineers gave this car the footprint to stay planted. The wheelbase was stretched, the track pushed wider, and a lower cowl kept the stance tight to the road. That wider body sat on Goodyear tires, big 22 5x50 which gave the Probe more grip than almost anything else in its class at the time. Next up, the suspension tuning played its part. Stiffer springs, a thicker anti-roll bar, and careful damping let the Probe hug corners without leaning over. Tests showed it could hold on at 0.86 G, which meant sharp bends did not scare it one bit. And when it was time to stop, 4-wheel disc brakes and those wide tires brought it down from 70 miles per hour in just 176 feet. Quick in, quick out, and quick to stop, this car checked every box. Speaking of the interior, and the sporty theme kept going. The bucket seats fit snug, the gauges were clear with white marks, glowing soft blue at night, and every control sat close enough to keep the driver focused on the road. The small steering wheel made every turn feel exact, and the whole setup gave drivers the sense that this car was built for them and them alone. Number 2. Chevrolet Impala SS, 1994. The 1994 Chevrolet Impala SS didn't sneak into the scene. It stomped its way back after years of silence, carrying the famous SS name like a championship belt. Let's start with the heart of this machine, because the engine is what makes it worthy of standing in the same row as the legends. Under that long hood sat a 350 cubic inch LT1 V8, borrowed straight from the Corvette's playbook, but tuned with its own flavor. It pushed out 260 horsepower and 330 pound-feet of torque. Numbers that may sound modest in today's world, but back then, this was the kind of power that made other sedans feel like they were still warming up. The numbers on the stopwatch tell the real tale. 0 to 60 miles per hour came in about 7 to 8 seconds, which is pretty impressive considering this was a 4,200-pound sedan with airbags and safety tech weighing it down. And when you lined it up for the quarter mile, the Impala SS crossed the mark in a little over 15 seconds. For comparison, its famous 1960s grandfathers weren't much quicker, which shows just how well this comeback carried the spirit forward. But here's where the twist gets fun. The Impala SS wasn't built off some wild concept platform. It was born from a Caprice police cruiser. That meant it had heavy-duty suspension, disc brakes with anti-lock control, and a limited slip differential that was ready for action. Think of it as a sedan with a law badge that decided to go off duty and have fun at the strip. And while we are on the topic of brakes, stopping power deserves its own spotlight. Slamming from 70 miles per hour to 0 happened in only 179 feet, and that was with almost no fade. For a car of this size, that is like a linebacker turning into a ballerina. Unexpected, but perfectly executed. Handling also broke every stereotype about big sedans floating around corners. With quick tuning from Chevrolet's engineers, the car could hang on at 0.86 G of grip. The suspension setup came with police springs, stiff anti-roll bars, and specially chosen shocks that made it firm without rattling the driver's teeth. Of course, push it too hard and you'd get a face full of understeer, but that rear drive layout meant a playful right foot could bring the tail around if you wanted to look like a hero. And yes, the looks mattered too. All 1994 models wore monochrome black paint, wide 17-inch 5-spoke alloy wheels, and the famous leaping Impala badge. On the road, it didn't whisper, it announced itself. Number 1, 1996, Ford Mustang GT. After the black-clad Impala SS left its mark, the stage shifted to a car that brought pony power back with attitude, the 1996 Ford Mustang GT. Right away, the biggest change was what lived under the hood. The old 302 cubic-inch pushrod motor was finally retired after more than 30 years of service. In its place came a 280 cubic-inch V8 with overhead cams, something fresh and modern compared to the old-school setup. It made 215 horsepower and 285 pound-feet of torque, numbers that look close to the past engine, but delivered in a smoother and cleaner way. Now, let us talk about the stopwatch, because that is where bragging rights are built. The Mustang GT dashed from 0 to 60 miles per hour in 6.6 seconds, and when you kept your foot planted, the car covered the quarter mile in 15.1 seconds at 92 miles per hour. Keep pushing, and the top speed sat right at 140 miles per hour before drag pulled it back. That was quick enough to keep smiles wide and rivals worried. But the motor was only half the story. Ford gave the car a stronger front crossmember to fit that new engine. And while at it, engineers reshaped the suspension geometry. A cross brace tied the strut towers to the firewall, making the body feel more solid, and a bigger rear anti-roll bar helped it balance better through long sweepers. These tweaks meant the Mustang could corner with more confidence, even if bump steer sometimes snuck in on rough pavement. The way it handled on open roads was entertaining. On smooth highways, you could pour on throttle or back off without shaking its balance. And even when drop throttle oversteer appeared, recovery was simple thanks to improved steering. The skid pad test measured 0.81 G, which was a little less than the old model, but tires were the real reason. Our tester wore smaller 16-inch Firestone rubber instead of the larger optional 17-inch tires. Moving from handling to the driver's seat, the Mustang GT carried a cabin that looked ready to please fans. Leather upholstery hugged bucket seats. The dashboard had 6 white dials glowing with sporty charm, and the design leaned toward race-inspired touches. It was not a radical redesign, but it showed Ford wanted this car to feel special when you grabbed the wheel. And to wrap the package, the styling shouted Mustang from every angle. The curved body lines, swept headlights, and that famous running horse in the grille gave it an identity that stood tall. So which one was your favorite speed machine? Drop a comment, hit like, and make sure to subscribe to the channel for more racing stories.